if we consider things in this binary choice, and by that I mean good or evil,
Yeah.
Not, like sort of binary gender or something like that. If people are confused by the word, I mean these sort of biblical, sort of analogies that we constantly are invited to choose between what is good and what is evil. Like, yes, the Greta thing, I said a few things and people got mad at me, and I said, I just want to know who lobbies her. Or the idea that if you send a child into an adult's world, she can tell them things that they can't. The optics of them shouting down a child are so bad now, nobody can say a thing. Or she goes to, talk to Zelensky about the ecocide. Well, I mean, okay, but I don't hear anybody going in there going, hey, maybe we should stop all of this to stop people dying. Instead, we have to be invited to share the picture of the Zelensky and Greta discussing ecocide. I mean, okay.
Greetings, Legion. Welcome to episode 195 of Into the Necrosphere. This week, making his return to the podcast for the first time since episode 85, the legendary Alan Averill. He is, of course, the host of the very popular Agitators Anonymous podcast. He is the frontman for Primordial, amongst various other musical concerns. And on this episode, we spoke about the upcoming Primordial record, How It Ends, which will be released by Metal Blade Records later this month. We also spoke in depth about a number of cultural, social, and other topics. You know, when we get together, the conversation gets pretty spicy, and this one was no exception. I cannot wait to share it with you. It's coming your way very shortly, but before we get to that, Wothrosch are a blackened death metal band out of Greece, one of the very best new acts that country has offered in a host of plenty. Their debut record, Odium, was released by Hammerheart Records earlier this year. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. Apparently, so did you, because the gentlemen from Wothrosch have very kindly offered a t-shirt to one lucky member of the Legion. All you need to do in order to qualify for this giveaway is to ensure that you are following Into the Necrosphere on Instagram. You need to be following Wothrosch on Instagram, and I'll post a link to their handle in the description to the podcast. And then you need to share this week's episode with your followers using the hashtag Necrosphere Legion. At the end of this week, September the 16th, I will pull together all of the names of those of you who have done so, and then my friends over in Wothrosch will select one lucky winner, and you will be able to strut your mean streets looking seriously sexy. To celebrate Wothrosch's generosity, we are going to be playing the music video for those watching this on YouTube. For those of you not watching this on YouTube, not only are you deprived of the sight of my handsome face, but you'll get to hear the audio at the very least. But yeah, we're going to be playing the music video for their brand new single, Tumor. It's taken off of Odium. One word of warning: if your kids are around you whilst you are watching this, best send them to bed. But I do believe that the vast majority of you are going to absolutely love them. So this is Wothrosch.
Yeah.
You just listened to Tumor by Wothrosch off their debut album Odium, available right now on Hammerheart Records. Just one more reminder, if you want to make yourself eligible for their very generous giveaway, then make sure that you are following Into the Necrosphere on Instagram, make sure that you follow Wothrosch on Instagram, and make sure that you share this particular episode with your followers using the hashtag Necrosphere Legion. I'll announce the winner next week after the gentleman in Wothrosch have selected that particular individual, and then you will receive your goodies in due course. If you're new to the podcast, my friends, make sure that you grab the nearest folding chair and beat the subscribe button on your platform of choice until it begs you for mercy. Also, make sure that you follow me on the socials. I've already mentioned Instagram, but I'm also on X and Facebook. And then make sure that if you genuinely want to show your love and support for the show, and you have a couple of ducats to spare, you head over to the Into the Necrosphere Teespring store and avail yourself of some of the high quality merchandise available there. Also, as many of you know, I am part of the podcasting Illuminati, the horsemen of the podcasting apocalypse, and we kick off your week every Monday with Brandon Legion, who interviews writers, directors, actors, producers, and others working in the horror genre on his podcast, Horrible 666. Every Tuesday, yours truly casts hexes and slays poses on Into the Necrosphere. Coming up in the next couple of weeks, I have got Kelly Schaefer of Atheist Until the Dirt, Evan Hopper of Quell, and Nas Alchemeth of Ecclese. So we are absolutely not skating our way to episode 200. There are some absolutely titanic episodes coming your way before we hit that particular milestone. And as far as that milestone is concerned, there are a couple of guest options in the offing. Once I know for sure who the gentleman or possibly the lady will be, who will be across from me on StreamYard recording hopefully an absolutely epic conversation for all of you, I will of course announce it, or I might keep it as a surprise. We'll find out. On a Wednesday, Sensei Mike Hill brings you Everything Went Black, and he returns every Thursday alongside Sheriff Mike Scondado and Professor Jeff Kashid, reviewing horror movies, both old and new, with one of my favorite podcasts of the week, Necromaniacs. On a Sunday, the Reverend Carl Haikara takes you on a journey through the weird, arcane, and esoteric with his weekly podcast, Soul Knox. And then skulking in the shadows is my good friend Cheyenne of the band Trivax. He has a fantastic podcast called Iblis Manifestations, probably the closest in terms of spirit and intent to my podcast, and he releases episodes intermittently of Iblis Manifestations. So make sure that you check all of those out. Thank you very much for the support that you have shown all of us so far. Make sure you stick around at the very end of my conversation with Alan, because I'm going to be talking about the 1-2 knockout that was delivered this past weekend when both Cryptopsy and Dying Fetus released new albums. And then on my weekly news rant, I will be rounding up many of the latest metal singles for Judgment. We will also be talking about some of the latest metal news headlines, pouring through the likes of No Clean Singing and Metal Storm so that you don't have to. So stick around for that. Sit back, enjoy, as I welcome back to the podcast for the second time, definitely not the last time, Alan Averill of Primordial. So welcome back. I think the last time that we spoke was about 18 months, maybe even 2 years ago. I do kind of feel like now is probably the best possible time for us to start or to speak again, because we've got a lot of things hopefully in the rear view, but maybe a few things to reflect on and a few things to think about as far as, you know, how it pertains to the new music you've put out and maybe how you're thinking about things nowadays as well. But before we get into any of the heavy shit, how have you been doing?
Yeah, I'm all right. I survived, you know. It's been you know, kind of curious year. We've obviously made the album. Sorry, I've been singing yesterday, so my throat's a bit fucked. We made the album, you know, which is like number 10. Quite smoothly, all things considered. Was quite a good experience in the studio. And then we had a very, very quiet summer. We literally only had one real festival, maybe some in May, 2 or 3. And then, which is sort of just after you've been recording and stuff, you kind of would like to get out and even you can't really go and play new songs yet because the label doesn't like if you play new songs and then people video them and put them online before the singles are out. But it's been a curious year, which has been sort of an insanely productive moment and then a sort of wasted summer, if you ask me. So it's had its ups and downs, but it's all right.
I was going to ask with the festivals, because obviously a lot of festivals took place. Was it by design that you guys kind of set out, for all intents and purposes, this cycle of festivals?
It's a combination of things. Some things I can't really exactly go into. There's issues with the book. What happens is this: basically, the booking agent offers you to festivals, and they pick and choose who they want, and then you negotiate whatever the fee is, whatever the offer is. And sorry about that. That'll sound good.
You're gonna have to break out some of that herbal tea soon.
So what happens then is you either get a few festivals or not, and we had two ones in Germany. Big one, Bang Your Head, where the guy who runs it got pretty ill. Rockin' to Icon, and I think one other, and they all just end up getting cancelled. So part of it is bad luck, circumstance. And then also, this year you're at the end of a 5-year cycle between the last album. And sometimes people are just like, well, look, we'll just wait till you have new music. But, when the band has been around for such a long time, one of the problems is that, and I was only talking with Sakis from Rotting Christ about this maybe a weekend or two ago. I said, how many more times do we do this? And because Rotting Christ did like 26 festivals this summer, and I said, mate, do you think you're going to be allowed to fly that much in 4 or 5 years? Which is a completely other concept. He says, I don't think so. We'll see. We can park that conversation. But
we'll definitely be getting back to it. But yeah,
the idea that everything will just return back to 2015 or 2016, I just don't see happening. And when you've been a band for 30 odd years, it's very much a case of hurry up offense now, right to the end. I said to the agent, we've had one good summer in 5, realistically, because you take 3 out for the pandemic. Well, last year summer was okay, and this one sucked. I said, well, if we only have 5 years left, it means I've wasted X amount of time. So I'm in kind of like hurry up offense mode from now to the end of life or the end of the band. I have no patience for anything. And of course, we're going to have a lot of stuff to do now. But I can't abide sitting around doing nothing. Whereas, of course, some of the other members of the band were like, oh, great, a summer off, I can just do family stuff. So it's swings and roundabouts, but we're going to start now. From now, I would say for the next 12 months, theoretically, there should be quite a lot to do. But it's been a kind of a mixed bag for you. I should be very happy that we made such a good record, in my opinion. But I suppose because of the nature of the last 5 years, all the other stuff has taken on a sort of a greater importance, but it's also it's become more evident and striking when it's sort of missing, I suppose. Is that right?
Yeah, and when you say all the other stuff, you mean being on stage, playing shows, touring, getting your music out.
Yeah, I mean, look, I said it probably to you during the pandemic. I mean, if things hadn't changed, then I wouldn't make any more heavy metal records. There wouldn't be any point, because like I made a Dread Sovereign album in the middle of the pandemic and lockdown, and there was just kind of no point. Came out, you went, oh cool, we went up to 10,000 monthly listeners. I edited a video, I helped with this, then it's gone, and then you don't, and then the label like, well, can you make another one now? It's like I just put everything into making that one. I'm very happy that Primordial, well, not very happy. That's anybody who knows me knows that doesn't happen very often. But the fact that there was no Primordial album to release during lockdown, because it's just a waste of music. Because even though it would have given people something, fans of the band, something positive, there's kind of like nothing in it for me. Primordial's not Bloodhouse Nord or something. Seeing as I've just happened to be listening to them today, which is like, it's not a studio project or something like this. And so to release an album when there's no agency behind it, it's kind of like a waste of energy to me. So,
So just one thing you touched on as we were starting. You mentioned you've been singing a lot yesterday. I mentioned to you I haven't heard the whole album end to end yet, but one thing that I did heard was "Victory Has 1,000 Fathers, Defeat Is an Orphan."
Yeah.
What really stood out to me was just how powerful your voice is sounding at the moment. And I know from listening to your podcast, obviously you've spoken a bit about singing and about practicing and things like that, during lockdown, outside of lockdown. I've seen the videos you've posted on Instagram as well. Like, did you spend any time kind of, or I guess from your perspective, do you think that the time you were able to practice, or the time you were able to dedicate to maybe improving your technique, the downtime, not being out on the road, do you think that has had a positive impact on how you've ended up sounding? Like, when you listen back to this record, are you able to listen to yourself and objectively say, I think this is one of my best performances?
Yeah, this is the best. I think this is the best singing that I've ever done. And it's not for want of I mean, we rehearsed in the couple of months leading up to it quite a lot, but it's not for anything I did in lockdown, because I didn't do anything. I didn't do any singing. We had a covers band, and we used to play secret gigs, and I used to play the bass and sing. But no, it's whatever it was about this album, it just sort of hit a sweet spot. And like, there's a couple of songs on the album that are one take. We rehearsed a lot before it. Everyone put in a big shift. Kieran did a ton of work. Everyone worked very, very hard, and all the studio was great. Working with everything just fell into place. And when you're in that kind of mood in that moment, you're just like, right, no fucking around, let's go. And there is some more. I always sang very loud, like very, very well. Post Gathering Wilderness. Maybe before that, I'm still finding this brutal voice, which is obviously you can hear. It's pretty difficult. It sort of shreds your voice a bit. But somewhere around 2005-06, I found that. And then for the last 20 years, then, I mean, you'd come off the stage and a monitor engineer would go, this is, it's just stupidly loud, you're going to hurt your voice, kind of thing. Or I've always sang very, very, in a very, very heavy way. There's not really any holding back on something, especially on this album. The album is much more angry. It's much more defiant. It's much more epic metal in a way. It's a bit more black metal in places. And also, when you're rattling through things, there's quite a few complicated harmony bits and different textures going on. But yeah, I mean, your voice is like a muscle. I mean, if you don't use it, I mean, in a sense, I'm not going to say it atrophies, but it feels. If you haven't sang in ages and you go, see, I haven't sang in a while now. After yesterday, it'll be tomorrow. It'll be back to normal or whatever. But you need to sort of exercise that muscle. It's the same as going to the gym or working out or something. I see it as, and that's why you see sometimes with older singers, you can tell somebody who used to sing. There's no reason why you can't still be a good singer when you're 60. But of course, your body is deteriorating a bit. But there's no reason why you still can't be good. But you can see bands who never rehearse anymore because, for whatever reason, families, distance, that kind of thing. So they arrive back to play a festival and you go, fucking hell, his voice sounded rough. And you've just got to keep your eye in with rehearsing or with doing something, because it can deteriorate. The muscle can disappear a bit, I guess.
I've also always thought, like, musicians should just have the courage to, I guess, kind of be kinder to their voices, or maybe play more towards their voices, like change the key of the song if you can't hit the high notes anymore, as an example. Like, I remember hearing Metallica play a couple of songs once and they had changed the key and James sounded absolutely fine. And then later on you hear them play shows again and they're like, well, you've gone back to the original key. He's clearly struggling to hit those high notes. It sounds fucking terrible.
Yeah, I think that whole YouTube comment thing of, oh my God, David Coverdale isn't what he used to be. But of course not. He's fucking 73. I mean, you should kind of just be happy in a way you're in the presence of Whitesnake. It's not going to be here for long. And he still has his middle voice. He's not going to be able to do Still the Night or, like I booked Virgin Steel, for example. I mean, David was, an amazing singing voice, etc. But these guys are getting old now, and you expect them to still be able to do what they did in '87. Manowar's tuned down for Eric Adams, Rob Halford. They all are, because the singing was so extreme or so high pitched or so had required so much force. back in the day. You can't expect them to be the same thing. So it's just like some sort of fool's errand. If you go and see, as I said, Whitesnake, and go, oh, it didn't sound like it used to sound. Of course not. I mean, there are some people, like, say, for example, I'm a big fan of Dokken. Poor old Don has had, like, I think, necrosis of his arm. His arm doesn't work. He needs a walking stick. He obviously didn't take care of himself on some level, but he also had cancer of the throat, and he's 73. But at the same time, if you're going to go and see Dokken now and you're going to go, fuck, he sounded like shit. I mean, you know, he's 73. He's going out in his own terms. I get it. But it's not 1987 anymore. What are you going to do? It's just, I admire that. Same thing with Lemmy, you know, at the end, it was painful to watch Motorhead. If you want to go out on your own terms, it's up to you as a viewer whether you're going to pay the money to go and see them. For me, I would pay, of course, to go and see Dokken. I mean, you get to stand in the same room as the legendary Don Dokken. Okay, his voice ain't going to sound great, but you know, what are you going to do?
On a non-metal related note, I spoke to somebody about this a couple of weeks ago on the podcast. I was dragged to the horse racing at Newbury with my girlfriend. She's like at a work do. And the one thing that I was dreading most wasn't actually going to the horse racing. It was the Tom Jones show that was due to be afterwards.
Wow.
That I was going to have to stay for.
There's a man who still has a voice, I think. Huh?
Mate, I'll tell you what. I was so fucking impressed. I actually said to, like, the people that she was with, they ended up not enjoying it so much because he was doing Leonard Cohen covers, Bob Dylan covers and stuff. So he wasn't really doing many of his hits. He did, you know, Delilah, and, you know, one or two of the more popular songs. But mostly he did stuff I don't actually think the crowd really got. But my God, did he sound good. And then I look at my phone and I'm like, he's 83 years old. Yeah. And the guy's moving on stage. He's engaging the audience. Yeah. He's belting out every song with like unbelievable presence, you know, just real range, dynamics in his voice. Yeah. I was absolutely floored. I couldn't believe what I'd heard.
Those old dudes, they were hard motherfuckers, man. They hit it hard. They drank hard. They lived hard. But those old guys, if you think about sometimes where they must have recorded in the 50s, and like, I mean, you're talking about the early analog recordings of placing the microphones and people playing at distances to the microphone, and you needed a bellowing voice to be heard in many situations. I mean, that he had a powerhouse of a voice. Yeah, no doubt about it.
One thing that you do as well a lot on stage that, again, I don't think people actually realize just how much it takes out of you physically. Like, you move around. I mean, you're singing, but you're moving around. You're very animated on stage. You know, I remember seeing the first time I saw anything live of Primordial was a clip from, I think it was Summer Breeze, where you did When Rome Burns. You know, and it's like, it's just this character that you inhabit when you're out there on stage. And, you know, Jason Pepiat mentioned it to me as a concept, being match fit. You definitely, to do what you do, you have to be very seriously match fit.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, it helps that you can, you know, it helps being able to play sport. It helps being able to run and train and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm sort of, there's a tour now in a couple of weeks and I've got a sort of eye on it. And like today I went running. I'll play a football match tomorrow. I'll probably play football again on Thursday. I probably played football 4 times last week. And it's all with my eye on, like, to be as fit as possible. And then try and cut out the drinking and stuff as well. But it really does, it of course helps. And if you're going to stand stock still and sing, Primordial would probably, the singing would sound better, but that's just not who I am. But yeah, you've got to, it is, of course, harder, and it makes you appreciate the Bruce Dickinsons of this world who can still fling themselves around at, like, whatever, what is Bruce, 68, 69, 70? And they still sound really, really good. Yeah, I mean, it is much harder to move around and stuff, and especially when you tend to sing quite loud as well. But yeah, it's having said that, you know, also, it's fucking hard to do what's like Mick Lagerfeld and Ishan and stuff do, as well as sing and play the fucking guitar. It's physically much more, I think, mentally taxing or something like this, you know, to have to do.
I agree with you. It's mentally taxing. It's not, to me as a you know, audience member, as a viewer and as a fan, it's not as entertaining.
No, it's not a physical thing, but, you know, you can do, I mean, you can do both, but like, yeah, the particular romping around the stage kind of thing. Yeah, that's just sort of always been my thing, I guess.
Where did that come from?
I don't know. I think it just sort of, in the beginning, I remember seeing a show by Sabbath in '89, and I was very kind of inspired by Martin Walker, early Sabbath. They're the first band I saw that wore leather and studs and gauntlets and black and sort of staffs with pentagrams on them and white shirts. And he was a really good frontman. And they just looked really, because I was always more into Celtic Frost and Merciful Fate and Bathory than, Sacred Reich and Testament and stuff. And to see that was like, oh, you can actually do that. And they were quite influential. And then I suppose you just sort of find your own characters, begin to inhabit your own personality on stage. And that thing of sort of moving around and making eye contact with people and having a very sort of a physical presence sort of came out of that. I wouldn't have said that I really had a handle on what you would call stagecraft, at least until 10 or 15 years into the band. I mean, there's great shows I can think of my head of from 98, 99, 2000, but it feels like I didn't really fully inhabit the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing until 2005, 6, 7. You kind of go, oh, okay. There's times when you have to realize that the way you on the stage, it's being lit a certain way. You forget that it looks completely different from the crowd, and that if you step above the boundaries of the lights, you will just be a silhouette. So what's the point in making fucking faces at people? Or there's kind of things you learn in certain parts of songs to just stand stock still, and that is more powerful than always running around. And I learned to take it in moments of intense physicality, and then moments where you're just like almost completely still. So because there's a power in that as well, and you learn to do that. So it takes you a long time. I mean, I'm sure anybody who's been doing it even now you're still learning and figuring things out with your stage craft, which is a kind of interesting word, really.
Well, I think stagecraft though is. It feels to me sometimes like, especially when it comes to extreme music, when it comes to death metal and black metal, it's not a particularly how should I say? It's not well embraced is not the right word. It's just not something I see practiced to the degree that I think it should be, or the degree that I think could benefit the music. Like, if we take, you mentioned Ishon. Ishon on stage to me is just basically like a guy in a band room rehearsing. That to me there's nothing exciting about that.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. He did his theatricality back in the day, and I suppose he's made that division pretty clear between what he was when he was young and what he is now. I mean, and I think if he went and did what he did in 1993 now, it would seem a bit insincere. Knowing, what I know of him, I think that's probably what he would say. And he's correct in that. He just is doing exactly as he is now. For me, like, I've always wanted to be, I was always attracted to being that character thing. I don't feel like, oh, fuck, I've got to do this again. It is part of the primordial thing. It's part of being, kind of fully immersing yourself in the narrative of the lyrics and the kind of performative side of it, the element of sort of theater to it. Even if I don't think you're acting, I think it's just sort of kind of like releasing something. I was
just about to say, when it's done at its absolute best, it's self-expression. It's not, you're not pretending, and that's what people buy into, is the authenticity.
Yeah, it's something innate, or whatever you want to say. I mean, back it would have been the kind of thing 10, 15 years ago we would have said was a ritual or something magical. But there's most definitely something magical and a form of ritualism, if you want to bring it back to something primal, in the process. I mean, as long as we've been alive, people would draw a circle in the sand and go, you stand here and I'll tell the tale standing within the confines of the circle. And we made theater, we made rhythms, or all this kind of stuff. And I think there's something very primal and atavistic in that sort of transfer of energy, but that takes place in the space of a live gig, and without dressing it up in all the sort of magical shenanigans or whatever. But there is an element of that, and then there's all these other things happening as well, and it's a very good focus for energy, so to speak. And I don't mean that in a holistic fucking bullshit sense. I just mean that I'm somebody who's quite difficult to I'm quite not distracted, but I'm quite sort of intense all the time. And so that hour and a half where you play the gig where I get to take out all my technical stuff, fiddle with it, fix it, take out all the clothes, blah, blah, blah. I don't really speak to anybody. That hour and a half, 2 hours before, where you pour a glass of wine and you fix all your stuff and whatever. That's a very important sort of moment for me to try and, I think, thinking about the stage, about the lyrics, about the performance, and then when the back, there's trying to get the mood together with the other guys, and then when the intro goes, that feeling which should be the hairs on the back of your neck and that all right, let's go kind of thing, and that's putting on all, becoming this, as I said, Jekyll and Hyde character who are the same man, as opposed to becoming something else. I think is sort of it's a very great focus for all of that kind of stuff. And that doesn't change. That hasn't changed since 91, 92, 93, when I first put on all the I guess the black metal stuff. So as long as I still feel that it's right to inhabit that, I'm going to do it. Although, I have my reservations about being, another 10 years, am I still going to be doing it? Who knows? So, you've got to grow old with it gracefully. So I don't know. It's, but certainly, there's elements of all of those things that are true at the same time about it.
The thing is also with you, it's, I think, and I say this as a genuine compliment, Primordial isn't singing about insignificant things. You're not singing a just got lucky or a fuck like a beast or something like that. Your lyrics are, I think one of the things I've always really appreciated about your lyrics is that there's a real modern day relevance to what you're singing about, but you're drawing from history to exhibit parallels between things that have been and things that we see taking place right now. I think because of that, just as a side note, I think Exile Amongst the Ruins has kind of grown to be really my favorite Primordial record, because I think especially in lockdown, that album to me really kind of came alive. There was something about it that felt to me to be extremely relevant to how I was feeling at the time. But sure. That being said, when I watch that, I go back to that video of you doing as Rome Burns, for example, and you're conveying the lyrics through your performance in a way that I think is really quite extraordinary.
Yeah, it's there is something different than a band singing about zombies or about fantastical stuff or whatever, and you sense that in the crowd. You may not be quite as popular as the band sometimes who sings about the zombies or whatever, but there is a sense that this has meaning, this has worth. The people who are really into it take it very, very seriously, as they should. But there's a feeling of something esoteric, something of the other about it, that when sometimes I stand and I watch an old band, say I went to watch an old death metal band now from the old days, and I was just standing there and feeling a bit disengaged, and I was like, okay, so they're going to sing this song from 91, 90, and I was thinking to myself, sonically it still means something to me, but they kind of lost the crowd by then, because the crowd was sort of middle-aged and stuff, but there was no sense of depth or meaning or urgency to it. It was just a sound. And I don't mean that in a bad way, because I'm an old death metal guy. Maybe it just caught me in the wrong mood, which is entirely possible. But that's the kind of secret weapon you have with Primordial, in the sense that if you're going to sing like the Coffin Ships, you're going to go like, here's something of a great gravitas, great weight historically. This is actual fact. And people sense it, like, all right, this isn't messing around. This isn't entertainment. This is all sorts of other important things wrapped up in what this is. And you can engage with it if you want to, or if you don't want to. If you're waiting for Municipal Waste on the other stage, that's okay. I like some Municipal Waste stuff as well. But we have a thing which is that a sort of what you could call it, secret weapon, which is the seriousness of it, is the gravitas. It's a sort of cultural, historical gravitas that's attached to the band. That means that even if you're playing in a small little room, let's say there's only 50 or 100 people there, you can still bring them into the narrative. You can bring them into the story. You can bring them into, like, stand close. This is going to be, that we're going to get something of worth out of this, and it's hopefully going to be that transactional thing that you're going to be moved. You're going to become part of what it is that we're doing, and places us in a slightly different. Well, there's a difference between us and X other band or whatever, But of course, they would say that about us, and so they would go, "Yeah, but you're boring, and we've got killer riffs." And yeah, they're probably right too. So,
It is a different experience though. Like let's take two bands I really like. I love Dying Fetus. I love
okay,
Primordial. Would
yeah.
I put you guys on the same bill? Probably
We
not.
we
It's a
played once.
different
We played
vibe.
once right before Dying Fetus in Austria, in the mountains and a festival. And we were standing on stage, and you could smell, like I could see lightning coming down the valley like miles away, but you could smell a storm. You sensed it was coming, like you could just feel it. And as soon as we finished, there was a deluge so extreme that Dying Fetus had to put off their show, but then they had to start playing in this torrential rain in front of about 20 or 50 people left of the 1,000 people who were there. It was so torrential, it was just fucking mental. But yeah. I mean, Dying Fetus, yeah, why not? Cool. Killer
I was
riffs.
say killer band, but yeah, very very different experience.
Yeah.
But again, though, you're also able to convey an intensity when you do something like Dread Sovereign, because I thought that Alchemical Warfare record was fucking sensational.
I mean, that's just heavy metal, man. That's just like Motorhead, Tank, Venom, Siratongal, bit of just a bit of old crusty Doom, Vitus, and stuff like that. And that's just my alter ego, where we get to play sort of old, filthy, punky, new wave British heavy metal Doom. And yeah, you get to do. I just get to play the bass and sing and take down the notch a few from the normal Primordial stuff. But yeah, I mean, it also means I get to write the music, or most of the music, as opposed to Primordial, where I'm just, we are all creating the structures, but I'm not coming in with a guitar to Kieran going, "Look, here's my fucking crappy riff that you have to play." And admittedly, he'd probably humor me and play it, but what we have isn't broken, so it doesn't need fixing with me all of a sudden showing up like fucking Bono and rattling home going, "Here, look, let me strum a fucking open chord over what you're doing."
One thing I was just pondering now as we were talking about it, when you're on tour with Primordial and you're channeling that sort of energy and that intensity night after night, do you find that it takes a toll on you mentally, physically, like as the tour progresses? Do you does it exhaust you?
Yeah, I mean, if you're headlining, you're doing 1 hour 45 to 2.5 hours every night, 2 hours usually. I would insist on always playing 1.5 to 2.5 hours. I think it's bullshit to just play an hour and 15, especially we've got long songs. We've played 3-hour gigs in like Russia and Greece and Chile and Brazil and stuff. We've gone, "Look, you're going to get your money's worth in the middle, mate." It's up to you if you want to go to the bar or something, but like we may never come back to Santiago, so strap yourself in. I like that challenge. I like the physical challenge of that, but certainly my, like the last tour at Swallow the Sun, certainly I was, and this is not going to do my rock and roll reputation any good, but certainly I was probably in bed by at least 2, almost every night, and you can hear people until 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 still. They shall not be named. That used to be me, and then at the end, at 5 or 6, 7 days in, I'd lose my voice to like 30% and struggle through a gig, and then struggle to the next one, and then come back up. But you get older now, and it's just not possible to burn the candle really at both ends, day. You pick a night to pull a longer one every now and again. If you're in a city that's cool, or somebody goes, "Oh, come to this bar," and blah blah, yeah, why not? Or you meet old friends, that's okay. But generally, no. I mean, you have to try and conserve your energy as you get older. And the things you do when you're 27 or 28 or 31, I mean, you can't really do anymore. You still can ish, but and that's the paradox, because the healthier you are, the fitter that you feel, the more your kind of body is like, yeah, you could stay up a bit longer, you could whatever, so you have to kind of fight your instinct to want to be. The worst thing you can do is, after singing, is go out and be shouting blah 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 in a bar over the music and then you wonder why you can't seeing.
Well, I think I'm 5 years younger than you, if Metal Archives is to be believed, and I don't even like doing that nowadays. I hate shouting at people. I was at the Springbok All Black rugby in Twickenham the other day.
Oh yeah,
Watched the match, and then the people that I was with said, "Oh, you want to go with us to a bar?" And I said, "Oh no, I'm going home." I
yeah,
made up a story and said I needed to go do something else, purely because I could not bear the idea of having to spend the next 3-4 hours screaming over voices of a bunch of drunk
yeah,
idiots and trying to
yeah,
make myself heard. I can't stand it.
yeah.
Um,
It becomes less and less attractive. All right, you know. I mean, I'm more of a kind of a I'll meet you before the show for a quiet
yeah,
pint and we can both whisper. I'm more into that. Although, but I was never much of I was never much of a. I mean, it's a long, long time since I was a big drinker, but I was
yeah.
never like a sinking pints drinker guy. I was just like this. Fuck this. Let's get the whiskeys in. But I was never. I always wanted to get into trouble or cause trouble. Not trouble, but like I always wanted to be to get up to mischief. I never was like I want to drink myself to destruction or
Hmm.
to just be like that was just never my style. So I guess that always kept me away from just from being too engaged with the alcohol. Although I do remember a tour with Fintroll maybe 2010 or 11 where there was a hell of a lot of booze, but
Yeah. No, I was completely and utterly teetotal until I moved to the UK.
okay.
And then a job that I started doing at the time, I'm not someone who buckles to peer pressure, but it was more a case of before I started working there, the guy kind of said to me, look, the culture here is on a Thursday night, we go out and we have a couple of beers. And if you're just going to stand in the corner and fucking feel miserable, then this is not the place for you. And so I since then I have grown to, I've got a fondness for red wine, but the last time I was really like embarrassingly drunk was 2010. And I have to say, honestly, I felt so fucking embarrassed and ashamed of myself after that. I said, never again. Like I drink socially. I mean, I drink a glass of wine almost every single night, but that's because I like the taste of wine. And
Sure,
I like sitting down, relaxing, turning on my hi-fi, listening to an album, and just chilling out, zoning out. I need that after a day's work. But beyond that, I don't really. I don't see the appeal to being drunk. I hate being drunk as much as I hate being hungover. So
I mean, it really depends on. I think that for some people, the alcohol or the drugs, whatever you want to say, if it's what you're using to escape, then it takes on a different dimension. For me, I never was that into escaping. I mean, it wasn't a way out of something or coping. If I wanted to get drunk, it was because I wanted to get drunk and then enjoy the mischief that followed on from that or whatever else. It wasn't like a necessity. It wasn't something I need to or had to do or felt peer pressure to. I mean, I like Guinness or whatever now, but being like dopey, like Guinness drunk after 10 points. Oh, it's a horrible feeling.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Let me ask you this question. I was listening to an episode of Agitators Anonymous that you did a couple of weeks ago, and you mentioned something interesting about the press cycle for how it ends. And you were saying that, the conversations have become a little more in depth, and you sort of feel like you're having to be, at the very least, considerate about what you say. Talk to me a little bit more about that. Like, are you feeling like there's more scrutiny on you since the podcast, since the fact that you have been, and as certainly as far as music and metal is concerned, one of the people to most openly speak your mind? I mean, I agree with what you said on that show about the difference between being outspoken and sharing your opinion. I don't think what you're doing is being particularly outspoken. I think you're just sharing and a considered opinion. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. Unfortunately, we live in 2023 where there does seem to be some degree of scrutiny on it.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's definitely true. I think what's happening is it's unusual. It's I've always been considerate about what I've said. I've always, even 25 years ago, I think that fool says all he thinks, etc., etc. But at the same time, I have noticed in this cycle, people are much more inclined to want to talk about the last couple of years about lockdown, about the pandemic, but also the podcasts and stuff as well. And I have to make the division with them. I have to go, look, you're going to have to say these are the opinions of me, not necessarily of Primordial, even if some of them share them. But you certainly do have to be more, I think, more considerate. Well, not considerate. You have to be considered always with what you say and how you phrase things, and think about what it is that you're saying, and try and make the points lucidly, with a certain understanding of the other side of the argument, and place that in context, and not just be too angry or too, off the cuff. But that was never really my style. But I certainly did find that there are, without a doubt, a percentage of the metal scene now that are just fucking sick of me. That there's a couple of people, about half a dozen or a dozen, from certain bands who've spoken out about things in the last 6 years, 3-4 years specifically, who they've now decided are, conspiracy theorists, or, on the right, or this or that or the other, or on the extreme left, or on the whatever. And again, like, I was watching, I don't pay any attention to forums. I don't pay any attention to anything. I don't read anything about me. I have one mate who delights in sending me screen grabs of things, but, and he says to me, look at this one. And it was like some fucking moron going, well, if you wanted to know what Alan is, it's because he did an interview with Bardo Mythology. And then the other guy goes, yeah, but so did Lisa Gerrard. Are you saying Lisa Gerrard is on the right? And the guy's like, well, I guess so. And then some other guy pops up and he goes, well, he also does a podcast with the guy from Gamma Bomb. I was like, now you're getting to something. Do you think the guy from Gamma Bomb would be friends with him if such and such and such? Now there's somebody who is thinking much more lucidly about, again, it's just gossip. I mean, that's just, if you reach a certain level where the band is bigger, but also the podcast is kind of grown and grown and grown. Everything that I've said within the 170 odd episodes is there for anybody who wants to go through if they want to, but nobody wants to really do that. They just want you're adjacent to this because you did this 20 years ago argument, therefore we don't need to count you. Or also what's more shameful is that, and I don't, like I said, I don't give a shit about forums and people gossiping about me. I don't read any of that stuff. I don't really even read reviews of the music or anything anymore. Haven't done in a long time. But let's say what's more, I think, is like sort of shameful is that once upon a time artists, and this is, not to put myself in the same breath or circumstance or in the same breath of consideration as some of, famous artists from the 60s and 70s or 80s, whatever. But once upon a time, artists, their job was to hold power, hold truth to power, or at least try to speak truth to power, to try and hold power to account. Now we saw, and very much so in the metal scene, also an awful lot of people lining up to do the bidding of the powerful, to either they were pro-lockdown, or they were pro-mandatory vaccination, or they just, it seemed to me they were, like sort of shilling for Big Pharma, if anyone say that's not the right word, but there were many people, punk rock people, Jello Biafra, people I grew up with the Dead Kennedys, who were always, speaking out against power, and they were, wow, you sound like a fucking scared old man. Now defending the same institutions of unelected power you once upon a time tried to hold to account. And I just thought it revealed a kind of a streak of, I'm not going to call it, conservative streak in the metal scene, but certainly a streak within elements of the metal scene that I think just handed in its rational, skeptical thinking for the common narrative, and just didn't seem to want to question anything. And if you did question it, it placed you on the side of some other people they decided they didn't like. And I think that was one of the great problems. Was I had this argument with a friend of mine in Germany. She's like, there are people protesting lockdown. I'm against it, but I can't be in the protest because of who the people are in the protest. I said, well, then they've won, haven't they? A stopped clock can be right twice a day, so to speak. If you can't acknowledge the fact that people you are supposed to be diametrically opposed to in this binary choice you've been given might have a point about some things, and then we're fucked, But of course, in this black and white sort of good or evil binary choice that people are generally given, they can't allow themselves to be pulled into sitting on the fence or in the middle. And it's got too great a maybe they feel it has too great a social or cultural conscience, or risk reward situation, which I can understand on some level. But yeah, I mean, I've noticed certainly the people who really admire the fact that, for whatever it's worth, in some small micro way, that you made a stand against it, are very supportive. But some of the people who are really against it are, yeah, they're more against it than ever. Sorry, that's a fucking rambling long answer, but you know what I mean. Yes,
Well, no,
yeah,
so you mentioned the word binary. Interestingly, the first time I heard you say that on your podcast, I'd had a conversation with my best friend about 2-3 days previously, and we talk a lot about similar things to what you and I are talking about right now. And one of the things I said to him is, I said over the last couple of years, I've formulated a theory about the decline of Western civilization, and I said if we truly are headed for decline, which unfortunately the trends indicate we are, we're headed for destruction. I think there's going to be, or historians are going to look at a couple of different factors as being the main reasons for it. I think first of all, the problem is that certainly from millennials onwards, and definitely Generation Z, the youth have been conditioned into responding to every single circumstance or situation with emotions first. Emotions trumps everything. There was even that incident that was very telling when Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, openly said in a news conference that what's right isn't necessarily what's true. And I thought to myself, this is fucking insane. You're basically saying you'll believe any delusional nonsense as long as it makes you feel good, but that tells the whole story. At the same time, you mentioned the binary. People have also been conditioned, or society has also been conditioned, into seeing everything as a binary. So, it's either friend or foe, it's either extreme evil or, unbelievable ally, the best thing ever.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, when they start to view things like that, and they're highly emotive, though, their emotions first when it comes to any sort of any sort of situation that or any sort of resistance that they were to encounter, it means that it makes it incredibly difficult, if not entirely impossible, to explore any kind of nuance, because everything is nuanced. If we take a political argument, right? Let's use an argument, because very often I'll use conservative arguments here, but I'll use an argument that's potentially would be seen as being pro-left. Bill Clinton, in his last 3 years as president, had a balanced budget, and he had a surplus in his budget. Now, if you ask the average person who's or the average Trump supporter or the average Republican voter right now, you mention the name Bill Clinton to them, and you'll get a deluge of he's the worst thing on the face of the earth, the only president worse is Obama, he sucks, he's terrible, how dare you support him? But the reality is, whether you supported him or not, having a balanced budget in the United States is quite a significant achievement. And if you say that you're on the side of fiscal conservatism, which I am, I would want the government to go back to something like that.
Yeah.
The flip side is true as well. People look at the Russiagate situation with or the Russiagate conspiracy, the narrative with Trump. It has been disproven ad nauseum, and if you ask the average Democrat voter whether Trump was in cahoots with Putin, I think the at last count, the survey that I saw said 63% says yes.
Yeah.
So that's and that illustrates the issue, right? There's no room for nuance, and unfortunately, this applies to almost every single critical issue in society. So you look at climate change, for example. We were talking earlier about whether we're still going to be allowed to fly in 5 years from now, and nowadays, if you dare question anything about the orthodoxy, about Saint Greta or the party of Davos and what they're trying to push down on us,
it's interesting. Like if we consider things in this binary choice, and by that I mean good or evil, not like sort of binary gender or something like that. If people are confused by the word, I mean these sort of biblical, sort of analogies that we constantly are invited to choose between what is good and what is evil. Like the Greta thing, I said a few things and people got mad at me, and I said I just want to know who lobbies her. Or the idea that if you send a child into an adult's world, she can tell them things that they can't. The optics of them shouting down a child are so bad now, nobody can say a thing. Or she goes to talk to Zelensky about the ecocide. Well, I mean, okay, but I don't hear anybody going in there going, hey, maybe we should stop all of this to stop people dying. Instead, we have to be invited to share the picture of the Zelensky and Greta discussing ecocide. I mean, okay, but it's again the climate change argument is another good thing. It's so emotive. All of these arguments are couched in incredibly emotive language that is designed to mean that if you have a question or you have any skeptical point of view towards them, that you literally are, evil, so to speak, because they're all couched in this emotive language. And it's a very clever thing that the powers that be, whatever you want to consider them to be, over the last 10, 12 years in the sort of post-economic collapse of 2008, where they successfully bought, lobbied, and paid for all of the social and cultural movements that had recognized that they were the enemy. They now sponsor. And so if you go, well, who lobbies or who pays for Greta's speeches or whatever, people will, shout you down as evil,
She's
but
just a brave child standing up
I mean,
for her generation.
I feel sorry for her, but like if you were an 11-year-old kid, there was a tweet she made like 5 or 6 years ago, which said the world, I'm reliably informed by some economic climate expert, that the world could end in 5 years. I mean, if you're 11, I remember watching the the famous Cold War nuclear. We were sat down as kids at 10 or 11 in primary school, which is 1980. Let's say 84. No, I must have been 8 or 9 then. I was 8 and 83. So we watched that famous, the day after, the morning after, whatever it's called, and we were obsessed with nuclear war, and we were 8, 9, 10, and you surely felt the world was going to end by nuclear, conflagration. And so what must it be to be an 11-year-old and think, well, the parents don't understand me, the world is about to end, but you're also on Twitter, and so is Greta, and if enough of you get together, you can get a professor sacked from a college by virtue of, it's a very weird way we've placed society now. We are expecting adults to behave like kids and kids to behave like adults. It's very strange, but yeah, it's this binary choice, and part of that is what modern social media rewards: the most extreme voices on either side, and it encourages people on either side to always misrepresent everybody from the other side as being the absolute extremity, when most people are in the middle. And so it's this horseshoe political effect, is that all you ever hear from is the people with the most extreme voices, and that's the audience capture, and so you're invited into this, sort of binary, this dark binary world where, in actuality, the what you want to call it, the divide and conquer psyop that's been perpetuated on you by a sort of, let's call them the elite class or whatever, that an awful lot of people just can't seem to separate themselves from the narrative to just step outside for a moment and go, oh yeah, maybe I probably have more in common with the person I'm supposed to be opposed to than not. But it's I mean, you've got to marvel at the evil ingenuity of it, but at the same time,
Well, this is my question. So do you think that that's a do you think that no well, this is the place to do it. Do you think that that's an outcome of the elites and their planning and their schemes, or is it just? And I posed the same question to my friend, and I said, is this just people being ignorant and stupid? And unfortunately, it's a symptom of education standards slipping and people being dulled into following empty calorie television, empty calorie entertainment, stuck on social media all the time.
It's a combination of, I mean, this is one of the things I learned in the last 5 to 10 years, is that it's a cognitive dissonance involved in understanding all things can be true at the same time. It's the idea that there is disaster capitalism, there is plans and plots by the Davos set, whatever you want to call them, they who do have plans. But don't forget the Great Reset. This is about the 10th great something they've manufactured in the last 30, 40 years. There's elements of truth to that. Then there's elements of complete performative theatrical fabrication. There are, I mean, if we take what happened in Ireland, do I think that your average health official was in on some top-down pyramid structure of a Machiavellian plot to steal civil liberties? And no, I don't. Do I think some of them were just they're just grifters who were so afraid of having one death on their conscience or ascribed to their actions, and they just made ill-informed, ridiculous choices. Yes. Do I think some of them were making money, lobbied and paid for by, the pharmaceutical industry? Yes, clearly. Do I think some of them just, like there are people who were involved who clearly were like, okay, well, I mean, I saw it in my own city. As soon as we're locked down, they started to change and alter the city. You could see this 15-minute, living ideal. They're discussing, all right, you're ripping up the city, tearing down this, they were like, yep, okay, here we go. Here's our chance. So, and you realize, of course, lockdown was in the end a political decision, not a medical decision. We discussed that in the last time. So it is whiplash, because again, it comes back to what we just said, is that not only do people want a binary, they want this good and evil. Are you good? Are you evil? But they want the headline to be either one of that. So when you tell them, as you said, everything is nuanced and in the middle, and all of these things are true, that yes, there are bad actors. Yes, there is some, deep state. I mean, look what's happened in Ukraine, this bipartisan bill between the Democrats and Republicans to pour more weapons into Ukraine. They're perfectly happy, AOC, as you mentioned, to be, and what happened to all the Democrats on the left who were anti-war? They're just pouring money into a new Afghanistan, because they get to sell munitions right into this black hole of this proxy war of a country. And so examine that properly. But we give this Putin evil, this, that, everybody wants this sort of simple narrative to wrap it up in, and it's just not possible. But of course, as my mate with 3 young daughters says to me, and we argued a lot, he goes, dude, you just have too much, you have a lot of time in your hands to to mull through, to pick through to get into the weeds, to pick through the bones. He goes, I haven't got the fucking time for this. He goes, I get it. But if you bring up, I was doing an interview the other day with somebody and they were pissed off at me, and I said, pangolins. And he's like, what? I went, pangolins. He's like, what the fuck are you talking about? I went, see, I remember. You've forgotten. The first lie, right? Pangolins. Get the fuck out of here. And then he went, oh. I went, yeah, now you got it. The jumping from, pangolins to bats to blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And he was just like, oh, yeah, I forgot that. Yeah, I thought you might have.
That's also the thing, right? People's memories are very short, and so again, I think, I was going to mention earlier with the climate conversation, for example, if you don't follow the orthodoxy, one of the things that they do that I think is incredibly insidious is they use the term climate denier, and we know that's derivative from Holocaust denier. And Holocaust denier is just about the worst thing you can be, short of being to the right hand of Adolf Hitler. So,
like the World Economic Forum Davos people, they made, or whatever you want to say, they made no secret of the fact that, like, okay, now we're going to pivot to climate. That's going to be that's our, raison d'etre, what do you want to say, for the next 10 years as we move forward. That's their narrative. And even if you say, well, what is it, less than 2% of carbon emissions are emitted by the UK, etc. Apparently, I read the discussion needs to be had in China, in India, in the developing world. I think what Ireland does doesn't make a blind bit of fucking difference, but that doesn't appeal to people's virtue signaling nature, that they want to, what could be more appealing for your average middle class career politician here than saving the fucking world? And they think that's part of what they're doing. Now, if that involves the continuation of taking people's civil liberties and human rights as the trade-off, then they were like, well, I'm quite happy in my, middle class suburban life, and they're not going to stop me traveling. And it's, again, what might be true and might not be true. I'm willing to concede, as we talked about before, that elements of my brain were, they got broken. I'm as played by my algorithm as some other people every now and again. And that, this by 2030, all the things that we talk about, this Agenda 2030 stuff, you might get there and go, oh, lots of that stuff didn't happen. Who knows? I hope to be wrong, in the sense that I'm not somebody who wants to catastrophize for the sake of my own ego. I'm quite happy to go, yeah, I got that one wrong. I'm very happy to be still playing some festival or something in 2030. But at the same time, I do think that the people who say it's all conspiracy, are not rationally or intellectually engaging with the subject matter and would have to concede that, like, yeah, okay, some things just aren't. Some
But
things,
again,
like,
I think
right, you know.
I think that people have very short memories, and like conspiracy theory, I think, has become it's become a slur, firstly, and
Yeah,
it's also become a very convenient way, exactly as you just said now, to ignore something that's too difficult for you to understand. Ivermectin was seen as a conspiracy theory. A couple of weeks ago, the FDA approved it for care in COVID patients.
yeah,
Not to mention the fact that the entire nation of India used it during COVID to very great results.
yeah.
And
I
it
know,
was a Nobel Prize winning medicine in
of
2015.
course.
I don't see any apologies forthcoming for the horse goo comments or the horse
Now,
medicine comments or the lies they published in Rolling Stone magazine, where they had people from completely different cities in completely different time of the year lining up in front of a hospital because apparently they'd been overdosing on horse medicine. And this to me has been the core of why I've found, why generally with society in general, I get so frustrated seeing how easily people fall for this nonsense over and over again, but especially the metal scene, because like you, I grew up at a time where I remember seeing Dee Snider, taking on the PMRC
yeah,
in Congress. I grew up at a time where I thought metal was about freedom and about sticking it to the man and about speaking your mind and stuff like that. And you effectively see a bunch of people, and all they're doing is repeating, whether they are from the US or not, they're just repeating the talking points of the Democrat Party. And that to
yeah,
me is fucking mind blowing. I
yeah,
like if you like, let's like recently, that dickhead from Green Day, he's now going on. They selling a new T-shirt, American Nimrod with Trump's face on the front, blah blah blah. So you look at it and you say, okay, have you once addressed the fact that the Biden administration has now authorized the use of cluster bombs in in Russia? So how can I take you seriously? You see Joseph Duplantier of Gojira talk about, the environment, this and climate change. We have to stop flying and stop eating meat, blah, blah. Okay. Have you once mentioned that China is responsible for 27% of the world's carbon emissions? That this year they've authorized the building of over 100 new coal power plants? So if
yeah.
you're not talking about that, but you want to tell me, who lives in a country that's responsible for 1% of carbon emissions, that I need to stop eating meat because that'll make a big difference? I'm sorry, but you can go fuck yourself. You're not somebody you're not a serious person. I'm not going
Yeah.
to take you seriously. And that, and in a rambling way, I guess, one, I'm saying I genuinely appreciate people like you, because I think you and I are quite similar in the fact that I think we can see the nuance, we can see that
I think that, yeah, I think that it's again, like, I understand, like, I do genuinely understand, when I sit and talk with, my cousins or something, it's about climate change, and I discuss the climate argument with them. And of course, there's a discussion to be had about that. It's just that my point to them is, like, I'm not sure we're going to get the nuanced discussion or to hear from either side of the debate. And of course, like, nobody really wants to discuss, of course, the China issue or the developing nations issue, because when you finally reveal to them, like, when you explain that, like, yeah, there's an incoming population problem coming in the West, and then you look at developing nations. There's an uncomfortable element of a sort of post-colonial empirical idea that rears its ugly head within their consciousness, where they're like, we can't tell people there what to do. I'm like, okay, well, we've got a very big problem then. And then how are we going to discuss it properly if every argument is couched in this sort of very emotive language, whereby like, they just built this huge structure in Dublin, and it says the beginning of your 15-minute living city. And that it just says it in huge letters on the side in the city. And I mean, most people would just walk by and never think about that. But that concept is living, working, all of your needs encapsulated in this sort of, I just sort of pod living.
It's a dome. I was about to say, it's basically an invisible dome.
Yeah, okay, it depends how far we take the principle of the 15-minute living city. Now, it could be just that some fucking cunt made the fucking sign and went, oh, that's a nice catchphrase, I'll take it from this press release and put it here. And it doesn't have the the political intent that someone like me or you sees in it. But at the same time, it's there in my city. And it seems to me like, okay, so what you're saying is everything that you need is in this 15-minute radius. And so therefore the implication is, well, you might as well work from home. Why do you need to fly? I know I only watched a podcast the other day where they're talking about what is it, one flight every 3 to 4 years by in the next, by about 2028, 2030, they're going to impose on people. Because if they give you a personal carbon footprint emission, you personally connected to, your CBDC or central bank digital currencies and this, well, I mean, then it's kind of game over for being able to exercise the right to travel. And again, people are like, well, why is that your right? And I go, well, really think about that and consider, is this what you want to return society to, some sort of strange neo-feudalism where people never really traveled more than 10 kilometers from where they lived and died? But there's still a kind of a new monarchy, a new monarchical set of people who are sort of ruling this sort of odd dystopian digital wasteland. I don't know. I mean, again, at the same time, you have to try and to hold the line between what is and what is just your algorithm playing you, which you have to admit can be a percentage as well, and what is a very real potentiality that's incoming. Like the idea of central bank digital currencies. I mean, in a cashless society, this isn't fanciful. And I mean, like if we lose the ability to have freedom of finance to do as you please with your money, I mean, what government is going to resist the idea? Like if you have a universal basic income of say €300 a week, what government is going to resist the urge to go, well, you can just spend it in these 8 shops that we happen to own or whatever, or you go and try and buy that flight to fucking, I don't know, go and see fucking Man United the weekend. It goes, not for you, because you've spent too much on alcohol and that. I mean, what government could resist elements of that? And if they can couch it in the language of safety, of saving other people, of saving the planet, blah blah blah, then I just can't see how they would resist the urge to want to do that. But then again, maybe, as my friend who works he works in Brussels, he was here 2 weeks ago, and he goes, I understand what you mean, but for example, there's new laws and a new debate coming across the EU at the moment, which is exactly about that, about how countries can't force a cashless society on the people. I said, I didn't hear anything about that. And he goes, I didn't think you would. Because it's, do you know what I mean?
Because of the algorithm. I mean,
exactly. So we have to try and remain balanced, but also vigilant. Again, yes. How I kind of look at it, and not go crazy at the same time.
Well, so I was going to ask you potentially quite a difficult question, right? So. Okay. You and I both spend our time thinking about these things an awful lot. I mean, I'm a very, you mentioned what your friend said about not having the time to do it. I'm extraordinarily busy, but it still plays on my mind pretty much all the time. Now, I think to myself sometimes, okay, why do you think about it? Well, I think about it because in some ways I feel like I need to anticipate it, for the good of my own family, for the, to ensure that my future is as secure as it can be. Yeah. The question is, if you're doing it in order to anticipate, what are you doing to prepare? And I'm not saying you're stacking up water bottles and stuff like that in the attic, but how are you anticipating, or how are you preparing for the worst eventuality in 2030? Say,
it's a very good question. I'm not sure I know the answer to that exactly. Certainly, it's been on my mind that the idea, being Irish, you're on an island. How the fuck are you going to get off this island? And the idea of not being able to move freely is like an existential hell to me. So the idea that no, you're just stuck fucking here, because if you're on the mainland, at least you can get on your fucking bike, on a train or bus, regardless of where we may be in 2030, where we were even 3 years ago. And so being on an island, I think you've got to think even much more. It's a much more complex mental process to it. But so I think, like, for me, like, when I was a kid, and this is going to be a slightly different answer, but when I was a kid, at the top in my parents' house, there was a kind of impromptu sort of little area where all the books were at the top of the stairs. And it's no joke to say I almost read every single one by the age of about 16. I read all the books my father did. I kind of skipped. I never liked cartoons. I never liked anything like this. I read serious books, and I think it the way I'm, so wherever I'm, why I'm fucking plugged into the Matrix. I was predisposed to have this sort of dark view of the world already. And so when the pandemic and lockdown came along, I mean, I like, they're my friends. You could say to them, I said, I think this is what's going to happen within a week or two. And they were like, get the fuck out of here. I was like, no, no, no. Because it's not that I anticipated this. It just sat in with a certain view of the world. And it's been, it's like I've always kind of had that predisposition to see the world in that sort of, in a political, this sort of dark political sense. And I think some people just aren't predisposed to that in the same way. Maybe they live happier, simpler lives. That's no problem.
Well, I think people like that too, right? Because so this is again something I've wrestled with personally. I think when you can see the machine working, when you can see the cogs turning. Once you've unseen that, you can't unsee it, and frankly, I wouldn't want to unsee it because, like, I'd rather be the one who knows, the ship's going down, and I'm saying, I told you it's going down. But, like, I'd rather be the person. At least I know. At least I'm not a fool.
Yeah.
But it does predispose you to. I sometimes feel quite isolated. You feel quite lonely because you look in on on society and you go, I'm seeing all these things. Why do so few other people notice it? And when I talk to somebody about it, they just look at me like I'm off my rocker. It comes back to the whole conspiracy theory thing. The fact that conspiracy theory or theorist is now used as a slur has kind of made it even worse. But you can't help but go off history. If governments, big pharma, etc., if they weren't shady, then why do they continually do shady things? You need to only look at the opioid epidemic to go, I'll never trust big pharma again in my entire life. Most recently, Reuters posted an article on the 1st of August where they state that Pfizer is going to do a headcount reduction because the demand for COVID products has decreased. On the 17th of August, Reuters post another article where it says Biden to urge all Americans to get their boosters because of some deadly new variant that's been discovered in Canada. And you look at it and you go, how is no sane thinking, objective human being can tell me that's a coincidence.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's, we're talking about companies that were the most sued companies in the history of mankind and this is the argument I would have with many people. I was like, you trusting your freedom to the hands of people who literally could not care less if you live or die. And they would go, that's a very cynical view of this. And I go, look, give me 2 minutes. I'll give you 40 examples off the top of my head as to why no one gives a fuck. But that's a very dark place for people to inhabit because they need to have faith that the institutions around them aren't all collapsing and crumbling. And I do understand that. And we can't have absolutely no faith in the institutions is quite a dangerous place to be. But at the same time, if we're talking specifically about, big pharma or these huge oligarchical sort of multinational corporations that have like, copyrighted DNA of indigenous fucking tribes and, like they're just taking their water supplies and like, sit still and I'll give you 50 fucking examples off the top of my head. And then you give me one. Well, but that's just too overwhelming for most people. And I get that. To have that as your space, your headspace inhabits, I think it's too dark or too depressing or too gloomy for most people. I understand that completely because also tomorrow they'll wake up, look out the window and go, oh, it looks like quite a nice day. Do you know what I mean? So, and they have their kids and they have to have, if you have kids, you have to have some sort of faith to bring them up in that not everybody wants you fucking dead. And of course, not everybody does want you dead. We have to say from the other side, of course, look back. And I've said this there's a couple of people on my Instagram who obviously hate following me, who keep fucking sending me things about vaccination. I go, look, you fucking dickheads. I never said that I was anti-vax. What I am against is the structure of coercion and authoritarianism that surrounded it. And I go back over the last 120 years, whether it's fucking measles, rubella, blah, 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 blah. I'm not, obviously not. Come on. You know, we need to be, but again, that's not what they want to hear. They just want the binary choice that you're this or you're that. They don't want to actually hear the nuanced context of, well, yes and no, or mainly yes, but no thanks to the structure of coercion. And because that requires a whole other conversation, which if you're just trying to shut someone down or you're trying to make somebody, you know, look a fool or just trying to label them something, is not something somebody wants to have. So again, it comes back to the same sort of understanding that we live in an age where nobody wants context and nuance, that everybody's invited to binary choices, and that while that still is the prevalent mood in society, I'm not really sure how we can have the conversation. I mean, if there is another variant and another this, are the people who, but like, for example, don't forget the last time we saw, you know, there was the bodies piled up in the streets of Italy, and you know, I mean, there was this sense of imminent horror that was, you know, encroaching everybody. Now, are people going to accept the same things? I mean, I still speak to people who, I was only speaking to somebody a month ago, were like, oh, I loved it. I thought it was amazing. I love lockdown. And I said to this person, was not an ounce of you worried about all the things we lost? And she just said, oh, I don't know. I never thought about that. I was like, okay, so you were okay because you had a garden and you got to spend time with the kids and blah. And I realized that's what most people thought. They were like, oh, this is okay. I don't know, who cares? It will be over in 2 years. The implications of something in a broader geopolitical sense, they don't care about that.
Yeah, cost of living crisis, inflation, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and then you say, well, and then you say, yeah, you know, or the tsunami of cancers that follow, or whatever, or the fact that more money was printed in the last 5 years than the previous 140, whatever it is, and that's why things are so fucking expensive, not just because of fucking Mr. Putin. Yeah, I suppose. Okay. I mean, that's just. I think what it could be split up in a bit like this. I think it's like 60% of people are the body politic of society who, by and large, follow along with what the government of the state says, and that 60% is enough to win elections. Then you've got 40%. Let's say 20% are floating voters, and then you get the 20% who are naturally, or 15% maybe, skeptical of authority, which we are within. And within that, there's another subset of people who are ultra skeptical of the motive. And so I realized that I was even further from.
I was about to say that sometimes my toe kind of goes in there, and I go, okay, come on now.
Yeah. So again, it's the willingness. See, my willingness has always been to grab the rope and pull myself back in nearer to the shore and go, all right, fucking tell me about what you think, and try and hold the line, and try and stay somewhat in the middle, even if people don't think you are, you know. And so that's why in the podcast I'll try and level both sides of the sentence, like or they debate try, even though some people, kind of people who think I don't are the kind of people who've never listened to the podcast, you know. But I mean, why would they? Because then they might hear something they agree with, you know.
Of course. Well, I also think, you know, and this is just a side observation again of the metal scene generally. I think the scene, the community, whatever you want to call it, I do think there's kind of two concurrent streams. There's people that still, you know, cling at least to those old school values, maybe people that are a little bit more realistic in their worldview, and then there's just people that just, you know, as I said, they think they're rebelling, but they're rebelling against nothing. You don't rebel when you're just literally repeating the government orthodoxy, you know, chapter and verse every single day and every single thing that you do.
Well, this is it. It's like you would just say to people like, hey, you know, simple question: has the government ever lied to you before? Yeah. So couldn't this be one of those times? Maybe some of it. Yeah. Well, if that's true, maybe think about it a bit. Yeah, but you know, well, you've said it, and you're supposed to be somebody I dislike. It's like, right, but your local politician isn't. It's just, you know, I mean, it's just it's a very simplistic view of the world, I guess, you know.
Yeah. Now let's wrap it up then with one final question. How does this all come together on a record like How It Ends? Because that title is very stark.
Yeah.
You know, and you could suggest maybe somewhat dark, negative. How does it? Yeah. I mean, you're not you know, I think you're you're probably dark the way that I am, but you don't strike me as a miserable person. You're not going to sit there and sob and weep. And
No.
there's a grit in you as well, which I think
Well,
is what
I mean,
carries you through.
the thing with how it ends is the cover is a propaganda poster from the 1920s, and originally it's a farmer with a sheath of wheat in his hand, and it's about farming. And we're in this pub, and I was trying to think about what needs to be the cover, and I looked at that and went, "That's it." And we put a gun in his hand. But how it ends is a sort of, if To the Nameless Dead was about the movement of nations and empires and states and the movement of borders, this album is kind of about the people within that who resisted and rebelled. It's about the romantic heroes from 100, 120, 150 years ago, the doomed revolutionaries who knew their lives were short, from all sorts of countries. I mean, only last week I've been doing a lot of reading about the Haitian Revolution, the first independent country from the French. And, so this album is very much like an underdog record. It's about rebellion and revolution and liberty, but it's not like a lockdown record. It's not about modern day-ish. It's got echoes in it, but it's got historical echoes. So it's about the people who within those structures of empire and colony of all that kind of stuff, who resisted, who knew life is short, but I've got to make my stand. And it's sort of asking the question, who are those people today? Who are they? And there's a lot of romance gone into some of the elements of, like, say, Joseph Plunkett is like a famous Irish nationalistic poet who was killed by the English after the Rising. And there's a very famous song about the woman he married called Grace, and they were married the night before he died, and it's this big, huge song in Ireland. It's a very moving song, actually. And I walked by his birthplace, just happened to be while I was making the Vermin Serpent album. I didn't know that's where, and it just sort of, I got into, I've robbed 6 lines of his poetry to put into the song. One of the songs, I can't remember which one. And I just got very interested in the idea of these young lovers, these doomed lovers who gave their lives for revolution. And I thought, what a fucking dramatic statement that is, and how it echoes down through history to me now writing this song, and how we should, to keep this historical, to keep it, breathe living history into the story by me putting it back into a song in my own small way. But also, like, just the act of, just like I said, being these doomed nationalistic poets speaking out for, they never lived to see Ireland become a republic or whatever. And I just thought about, or Pilgrimage to the World's End, it's about Irish people being sent off, but not only Irish people, as convicts to to Australia and whatever, but really kind of about all refugees and migrants being moved around the globe by the rich and powerful to serve time as convicts or to die on boats on their way to whatever tragic future that awaited them. And it was a sort of, this album is a really like the kind of underdog album. There is, the sort of, for all sorts of peoples or whatever you want to say. And yeah, like I said, like reading, like last week, spent my time looking up as I said, the Haitian Revolution, being like, wow, fucking look at this. And that's kind of, it feels like the metal scene, if I can say something a bit, not to sound arrogant, but metal scene kind of feels like it needs a record like this at the moment. A big epic metal record with a sort of defiant attitude that's kind of got it's got the blueprint of old heavy metal in it, which was actual rebellion, an outlaw kind of sense to it, and a kind of fuck you-ness to it, which seems to be towards authority, missing from an awful lot of metal now, mixed in with it, as I said, this sort of historical sense of the downtrodden and the poor, and something like this is woven into the fabric of it, Anyway, there you go.
Well, something. Whenever I've recorded a great episode with somebody, I have this dread in the back of my mind. Anytime that there's a sequel, that are we going to be able to top what we did previously? And I will tell you, I think we unequivocally bettered our. This is our third episode together, because I did one for you and you did one. Yeah, we did I think we did ourselves proud on this one. So thank you so much. I just want to say again, I genuinely appreciate you as an artist. I think you're an incredibly important voice in the scene, and it's just absolute pleasure having you on. And hopefully, at some point before we're told we're no longer allowed to travel more than 15 minutes from our house, we can sit down, or we can have a Guinness, or we can have a beer.
And for everyone else, they can say, is that gobshite never off the telly? Yeah.
Yeah. All right, my man. Take care of yourself.
No problem, Chief.
Bye-bye. Due for release on September the 29th. If you are not excited about how it ends, the new upcoming album by Primordial, you are probably deaf or you have stumbled onto this podcast by mistake. But that is a song taken from that record. It's called Pilgrimage to the World's End. Absolutely fantastic stuff, and what a huge pleasure having Alan on the podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. And like I said, he will definitely be back on the show again at some point, and hopefully one of the episodes we do is in person, because I think if the chat is spicy over StreamYard, then I think over a couple of beers sat face to face, it might just go nuclear. All right, my friends, I will post the link to the Primordial Bandcamp in the description to the podcast as always. So if you do head over there and you pre-order the new album or you buy yourself some older music, then let Alan know where you heard him. And of course, make sure that you check out his podcast, Agitators Anonymous. I know that he likes to fly solo, but I think it's kind of a given thing that spiritually we regard him as HORSEMEN adjacent, which I mean as a very, very big compliment. Okay, let's talk now about the fact that this past Friday saw the simultaneous release of two of the heaviest, most bloodthirsty and barbaric albums of 2023. I speak, of course, of Cryptopsy's As Gomorrah Burns and Make Them Beg for Death by Dying Fetus. Just when I thought Dying Fetus couldn't top a more attitude-heavy title than Wrong One to Fuck With, they absolutely blew that out of the water, but it really has been a testament to just how stacked this year's release schedule has been, that not only have these two albums dropped on exactly the same weekend at the same time, but this month alone, we are still due records by Shining, Cannibal Corpse, Primordial, Mayhem, Profanatica, and those are just the higher profile names. Those are the seasoned gunslingers. I'm not even talking about some of the newer bands, some of the really exciting bands, which we will undoubtedly pick up on the news rant later. And the best thing about it is a lot of these bands are putting out some of the very best work of their careers. I mean, we've heard some of those Cannibal Corpse singles. They have been absolutely sensational. And we have also been getting gradually more excited about the new Cryptopsy. So let's talk about that first and foremost. As Gomorrah Burns is the 8th studio album by the Canadians. It follows up their self-titled 2012 record along with a pair of excellent, but in my view, criminally overlooked EPs that came out in 2015 and 2018 respectively. And really, if you didn't check out those EPs, make sure that you do. They are absolutely fantastic. I think a lot of people ended up sleeping on this band because of how much they disliked the Unspoken King. But, I think that they kind of got back on track again with a self-titled album. But if there was any doubt, those EPs absolutely wipe that doubt right off the ceiling. Now, on this album, right from the outset, I'm going to say that if you're a fan of those releases, then you are going to be right at home by what's on offer by Cryptopsy in 2023. And as much as I was one of the very few people that enjoyed The Unspoken King, I will also say that the vast majority of you can rest easy in the knowledge that Matt McGeachy seems to have retired his singing voice permanently. There's no clean singing to be found anywhere on As Gomorrah Burns, and there is quite, I'd say, little to no of the deathcore elements that really kind of got a lot of fans' backs up back in 2008. What this record does have in spades, though, in addition to Cryptopsy's trademark technicality, is thoroughly well-crafted songs, perhaps even some of the most memorable songs that they've produced since their consensus best ever album, None So Vile. Now, one of the major shots creatively in the arm for Cryptopsy on this record, I think, has been the inclusion of a more noticeable black metal influence that's never obtuse, but it always serves as an effective counterpoint to the tech death chaos that they so love unleashing. Again, it's something that we started spotting when we were listening to the new tracks on the news rant. It is omnipresent on this record, and it is highly effective. On their past records, I think particularly the Mike DeSalvo era albums, that hyper technicality could sometimes feel like a bit of a grind. Here it's used frequently, but I think there's enough variation to, kind of make it have its place rather than for it to feel like, that's all that Cryptopsy have to offer. I think the album is very well paced too. It wraps up at just over 33 minutes. It leaves you sufficiently sated, but eager to revisit what you've just heard. If you have ever given up on Cryptopsy for whatever reason, I strongly urge you to give As Gomorrah Burns a fair shake. It's not None So Vile, but nothing ever will be. What it is a record that is almost definitely worthy of inclusion in any conversation about Cryptopsy's best records, not named None So Vile. Next up, we get to Dying Fetus, and as we're talking about a band's best records, I personally didn't think that we would see Dying Fetus produce an album that could top their absolutely masterful 2012 record, Reign Supreme. For me, that record was a culmination and a celebration of literally everything that I had grown to love about Dying Fetus since I first heard them way back in 1996 on Purification Through Violence. I remember cranking that up for the first time and thinking that it was so absolutely obscene in its heaviness that, if they kind of took it a step further, you would need special audio equipment to be able to properly decipher it. But apparently the boys from Baltimore have decided to prove a point, because after spending about a week or so listening to Make Them Beg for Death nonstop, I am just about ready to declare this the crown jewel in a career that has consistently delivered brutality of the very highest quality. Make Them Beg for Death doesn't really offer us anything that we haven't heard Dying Fetus do previously. What it does do is present the band, I think, at their absolutely most confident, maybe their most catchy, and I think it strikes a beautiful balance between technicality and between groove up. I mean, to such a point where if we had to revisit that ultimate beatdowns list that we put together a couple of weeks ago on the news rant, I'd say you could probably take every single track on this record and stick it on there, because they would be worthy entrants. Every single song is devoid of fluff, which is great as well. It is crammed with catchy, memorable riffing, really nasty slamming breakdowns, as I said. Even some pretty awesome shredding by John Gallagher. The mix is really beefy. It's got enough low-end punch to enhance the heaviness without compromising on the clarity of the instruments. And frankly, I think every single member is in peak form. As a matter of fact, I'd go as far as to say I think this may be, based on brilliant cadence and delivery, I think this is probably John Gallagher's best vocal performance to date. For evidence of that statement, as well as the statement that this might be one of Dying Fetus's best records ever, I am going to give you one of my very favorite songs off of Make Them Beg for Death. This is a track called Undulated Carnage.
Of
That was Unadulating Carnage by Dying Fetus off Make Them Beg for Death. I think I may have called it Undulating Carnage. Apologies for that when I introduced the song, but you know what I'm talking about. Great tune, great record. Links to Cryptopsy and Dying Fetus's bandcamps will be in the description to the podcast. Head over there, get yourself some music. Let them, and by them I mean particularly John Gallagher of Dying Fetus, know that it was old Jackson at Into the Necrosphere that sent you. I will get John Gallagher on this podcast at some point. It may not be this year, may not be next year. It will be one some other year in the not too distant future. But great stuff there. Right now, my friends, if you don't support the mighty Springboks in the current Rugby World Cup, then please don't get to step in, because I would like to have more than 2 people listen to my weekly news rant.
Round them up for judgment. And hang them where the world can see.
All right, friends, rather than go to Metal Storm, we're going to mix things up a little bit this week and start off on No Clean Singing. First of all, there is a Seen and Heard column here and news of a potential new Suffocation record. The writer says here, I detest clickbait, but I've not seen an official announcement of a new Suffocation album, only the surfacing of the cover art. He's posted a picture of it at the top of the page. And then he says there's also a notice on Metal Archives that a new Suffocation full-length album named Hymns from the Apocrypha will be released by Nuclear Blast on November the 3rd. Apparently there was a song that came out this morning called Seraphim Enslavement, but now it is no longer available for streaming. Yeah, we'll have to see what happens there, but certainly looks serious enough. I've got to say, if I were the guys from Suffocation, based on what's all come out this year, I maybe have held out to 2024. I mean, maybe that's not their choice. Maybe the label is trying to push them to do so, but you know, we went down the laundry list of some of the bands that are due to put out other stuff later this year, or you know, within the next 2 months. I kind of feel like the traffic is just a little bit too heavy to risk putting out something now. Outside of that, we've got a band called Go Rot. Again, the writer says here he's chosen a video for the song Dredge, a crushing and crazed debut single off the Idaho band's second album, Wound. I'm not familiar with Go Rot. It says here, after just a brief moment of wilderness beauty in the video, Go Rot then take a wrecking ball to all those pastoral scenes with doses of excruciating feedback, fuzz-bombed doom riffage, monstrous growls, and bloodletting shrieks. Certainly sounds like something that I want to hear, so let's give it a spin. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you've got, it seems like the lead singer is the drummer, which I have to say, it's not often that people do that. I've always admired people that are able to do that, because for me, frankly, it would be hard enough to sit on a drum stool and, you know, even keep, you know, a semi-coherent, timely beat, but this guy seems to do a pretty good job of it. He's got some seriously throaty, nasty vocals, and I like when the rest of the band join in with him. Riffing wise, it kind of reminds me a bit of the bastard child of Electric Wizard. There's maybe a bit of I'm trying to think, maybe a bit of I Had God going on here. I like it. I'm pretty into it so far. So let's get back to it. Pretty decent music video as well, I've got to say. Yeah, I think very fuzzy, very fucked up production, real aggression. There's something about this, like there was a Cephalic Carnage album that came out years ago called Anomalize, and it had a fucking brilliant track on called Peacemaker. And I always thought to myself, I wish that there would be, or I could find a band that does an entire album that sounds like this particular song. If you know the album, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's a song that is very, very different to anything that's or anything else that's on the record. I think maybe because of that, it really stands out. But yeah, I'd always hoped I could find a band that does an entire record that sounds like this. Frankly, Gorot sounds like they may be that band. So good stuff. Thumbs up from old Jackson. Next up, they've got the premiere of a band called As the Sun Falls. The song is called The Wanderer. Let's see how they describe this. It says, founded in Switzerland in 2020 as a solo project and now ensconced in Finland as a full band with a new lineup following its founder's move, the melodic death metal group As the Sun Falls have firmly planted their flag in the audio territory of Northern Melancholy. It is a soundscape where giants stride and cast long shadows. Such better known bands as Before the Dawn, Wolfheart, and In Mourning readily come to mind. I don't really know Before the Dawn, but I do know Wolfheart, and I've always thought they're a little bit too polished for my taste. Which I know is maybe a little rich coming from somebody who's a big fan of Septic Flesh, but you know. That's just how it goes. Anyways, the track here is called The Wanderer. Let's give it a quick listen. I am going to call an audible and jump forward by about 2 minutes. It's a 8-minute, 20-second song, so it's got a fair bit of length to it. Let's hope that by the time we hit the 2-minute mark, business has picked up. It's not terrible. I think had I heard this back in the mid-90s, I would have loved it. I think a lot of people would have loved it because it has got a real kind of mid to late 90s feel. You know, this is the sort of band that, you know, would have been plastered all over the Nuclear Blast catalogs, and, you know, people would have absolutely loved it. But yeah, I don't know. For me, it's there's just something that's lacking here, a lack of severity. Which I know is a frequent accusation that I make, or frequent allegation that I make. And, you know, the reality is if you play this to the average person, they'll still think it's a bunch of racket. But for me, yeah, it doesn't quite cut the mustard. I can definitely see that people would like this. I think if you're a fan of a band like Insomnium, for example, which actually I am, then I can certainly see you getting a lot out of that. But for me personally, it's not really doing anything. It's not grabbing me by the ghoulies. Okay, next up we have got a new track by Nightcrowned out of Sweden. It says here, we latched on pretty hard to the music of Nightcrowned, beginning with our premiere of a song from their 2018 debut, Humanity Will Echo Out, continuing through our premiere of a song from their 2019 debut, Impious Viam, and moving on from there, a lot of enthusiastic commentary about their second album, Hadon Fard, which came out in 2021. And so we're already relishing the release of their third album, Tales, now set for release by the Noble Demon label on November the 10th. The first sign of what it will bring is a lyric video for a single called De Namlosa, which is also translated to The Nameless. Apparently it's got a guest vocal appearance by Jens Riding, who was in Turfing. Really like, I'll need to dig up the name of the album. There was one particular Turfing record that I thought was a 10 out of 10 masterpiece. The rest I never quite got into so much, but that particular record I thought was fantastic. Anyway, let me shut the fuck up and let's hear what Nightcrowned sounds like. When this song started, I was already thinking about the jokes that I would make about what the new Dimmu Borgir album sounds like. They don't quite sound like Dimmu Borgir when things get properly underway, but this is another one that I'm afraid this is not really my thing. Again, I think if you're a fan of Dimmu Borgir, or if you're a fan of Fleshguard, Apocalypse, or bands like that, this is absolutely going to be your thing. But for me, it's... yeah, again, it doesn't really have that bite that I like in music. It's certainly no, the Codex Necro or anything like that. So I'm going to give it another minute because things might pick up. But so far, I'm feeling a little rubbery about this one.
Thank you.
The guy seems pretty incensed as well, because right at that bit that we just paused now, before it kicks in, he calls someone a sloot, also known in English as a slut. Anyways, I can't hear that word and not laugh anymore, because years and years ago, a very good friend of mine and myself we were walking around in Johannesburg at the Randburg waterfront before that turned into a complete and utter dump. And there was a guy standing outside having an argument with his girlfriend, and I couldn't, you couldn't hear everything that they were saying. But at one point, this dude blurts out, "No, no, I won't listen to you because you're a slut, S-L-U-T, slut." So I can't hear that word anymore and not laugh. But anyway, we move on to some more new music. They've got a new track here by Celeste. Now, this is a band that I do like. We spoke about this I think a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months ago. Their 2022 album, Assassin, or Assassins, or whatever they wanted to call it, they put that out on Nuclear Blast. I thought it was great, and I thought it really suffered from the fact that it was put out at the same time as the new Immolation, early in the year, when, I don't know. Metalheads apparently hibernate like bears in the winter. But in any case, it says here, Nuclear Blast reports that With Idle Hands might be the most tender song that Celeste have ever written. You heard me lose my voice there because the previous album was pretty rough, certainly in points. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Vigedood. But anyways, its English title and lyrics set it apart from anything the band has done previously. It also includes vocals by Tim from the US shoegaze metal band Grievo. Tender is, of course, a relative term in context of a band as heavy and frequently harrowing as Celeste. And so while the haunted crooning and gentle but equally haunted instrumentation in the song's first phase might merit that adjective, the abrading whine of the guitars and the percussive detonations in the next phase call for another term. So we're going to have to listen to probably the first minute and a half or so, then we'll jump into about the halfway mark of the song. And let's hear what Celeste is churning out in 2023. I'm going to pause there. So, is it too tender for me? No, I actually quite like it. I think it's got a really thick atmosphere, really dark, really haunting. I think that those vocals are actually really good. I don't even know what Grievo sounds like, but Tim can certainly croon his way with the best of them. So yeah, I don't think that's bad at all. That discordant part that kicks in there suggests, or certainly hints at things to come. But I like it. It's moody. It's different. It's one of those things where if you were to listen to an album that is, full of really chaotic, frantic black metal, sometimes having something that, really sort of hits you as a bit of a creative swerve, something out of left field like that, I actually always quite like. So, so far so good. I'm going to jump now. The song's actually not all that long, so I'm going to just jump to the 2-minute, 20-second mark, because I'm curious to hear what it sounds like when it gets heavier. Let's hope for Celeste's sake that it does get heavier. I would have hoped that it did get a little bit heavier. I like that intro, but I had hoped that maybe it built up to something a little bit more punishing. Also, that music video, which if you were watching this on YouTube, you would have seen, is a tasteful black and white montage of a couple doing the no pants dance. But I mean, I like the beginning of it. Again, I think in the context of an end-to-end listening experience, it might actually be pretty good. And I like the band. I've got enough trust in them that I know they're going to put out something pretty decent. But I would have hoped that maybe the adrenaline would have kicked in a little bit more towards the end of that song. Okay, next up we move to Fuming Mouth and their new track. Now, I think, again, we may have spoke about this because their vocalist was diagnosed with leukemia in 2021, and they actually talk about it here. They said, fans of Fuming Mouth know that vocalist guitarist Mark Whelan was diagnosed with leukemia in 2021. He spent nearly a year being treated with chemo and a bone marrow transplant and emerged in remission in 2022. That is happy news indeed, as is the news that he and the rest of Fuming Mouth have recorded a new album that will be released by Nuclear Blast on November the 3rd. Tell you what, I am definitely going to see if I can get Mark Whelan or somebody from the band on the podcast. So they've got a track right here off the album. They released a song, and I can't remember whether it was just a track or whether they put out a full EP, but back when we found out about this very shitty news, I just absolutely fucking loved the song, and I was so sad that there was a chance that you might see a potentially great band like this not get the run that their talent or that was befitting of their talent. So I'm glad that obviously that Mark seems like he's healthy. Glad they're back. So let's hear what the song sounds like. It's called "The Silence Beyond Life." So, I like that. I don't know if I'm as impressed with it as I was when I first heard these guys, and I'm actually going to look for that song now, because it feels to me, unless I am busy losing my, or busy getting Alzheimer's, it feels to me like they have taken a fair bit of... or there's been quite a bit of creative reorganization, I think maybe is the right way to phrase it, in the band's absence. The song the song I really liked by this band was a track called "They Take What They Please." It was put out a year ago. Let's give this a listen and compare. Now that, my friends, is what I call fucking absolutely badass. As I said, I don't mind this song, but it's really different. I mean, they may as well call themselves a different band. I admittedly only know the one song that they've put out, so maybe that is the anomaly in their back catalogue, and I'm the one being being unnecessarily harsh. Like I said, don't think that the Silence Beyond Life sucks. But, I like bands that do the knuckle dragging thing. So, in case that wasn't patently obvious by how much I adore the new Dying Fetus. I'll check out that new Fuming Mouth when it comes out. But, it could have been a little bit more badass. Okay, Overthrow. We've actually featured Overthrow on the podcast, and it now appears as though they have got a new album on its way. Jay White of Overthrow. I'm trying to think when he was on the show. This is again, probably a good 100 episodes or so ago. It says here, over the course of a demo, an EP, and a 2021 debut album, Strike Down the Savior, it's fair to say that the music of blasphemous UK extremists Overthrow has evolved since their formation in 2011, moving from gritty thrash into an amalgam that has brought in elements of blackened death metal with savagely ruinous but captivating effects. Blah, blah, blah. They're putting out a new EP called Ascension of the Entombed. They've been signed to Redefining Darkness Records. Congratulations, gentlemen. And this EP is coming out on Friday, the 13th of October. I always liked them. I had a great time when Jay was on the podcast. Got good response to that too. So excited to hear what they've done on their new music. The track in question, the one we're about to listen to, is called Caustic Vengeance. Nice break there. I like the doomy intro. It has almost a slightly My Dying Bride kind of feel to it. And then we sort of go, pretty full pelt into black metal territory before they kind of rein it back, and some of that thrash and some of that death metal influence comes in. But I like it. I think Jay's vocals sound good. I think the band sound really tight. I know it's only Jay and Scott Lindsay, the drummer, who actually does anything, and then they've got live musicians that play with them. But like I said, the most critical thing here is I am very, very glad that they have continued, and they've moved on to getting signed by a pretty decent label, because Redefining Darkness has got some good bands. So kudos to them. Song is not bad at all, and I am looking forward to hearing more. This is one I've wanted to check out for a while, and I've been saving it for the news rant. King Ov Wyrms. The song, I believe, is To March from Darkness. And they say, yeah, we've had some very positive things to say about Lord of Thorns, the 2020 debut album by King Ov Wyrms, and we weren't the only reviewers or listeners to greet the album enthusiastically. I did not know that record at all. The main reason I want to listen to them is because King Ov Wyrms just sounds fucking badass. So, in any case, they say, yeah, that it started off as a solo project. They compare it to the likes of Morbid Angel, Bloodbath, Enthroned, Vader, and Dark Funeral. There is a new album coming out on October the 6th, called The Womb of Borealis. And apparently there are some changes in the band's lineup and their songwriting. So without further ado, I will zip my lip and let's hear what To March from Darkness sounds like. Right there, that little like tease, that flirt of melody that they've got in that riff, I think is fucking brilliant. I've got to say, I actually think this band is let down slightly by the comparisons to, especially to Belphegor and Vader. I mean, maybe they listened to those bands in their private time. And you know, I mean, I guess in a meta sense, you can say that those bands have influenced them. But I wouldn't say, like, if you're a fan of Vader, then definitely go check out King Ov Wyrms. Not at all. I would argue the same with Belphegor. You can hear the Morbid Angel influence in there, especially in the riffing. But this has got a much more cavernous, nasty kind of vibe to it. You know, filthy death metal, kind of like Grave Miasma. Maybe like I'd actually say they've got more in common with Incantation than they do Vader, certainly. And I can see them being a band that would go over extremely well with with Incantation on tour. Actually, speaking of tours, before we get back to King Ov Wyrms, here's an idea. Cryptopsy, Dying Fetus, co-headlining tour with werewolves as main support, and then they can alternate out whoever they want to do the kind of opening support slot. But those three bands out on the road in whatever land, in whatever country, and I've got the name of the tour already decided upon. You guys tell me what you think of this. The Depussification of the Nation tour 2024 or 2025 or whenever they do it. If anyone in those bands are listening to this, you can take that name. I'm not even going to charge you royalties for it. I know that it's fucking genius. But certainly also very fitting for those bands because I think that they would jack up your testosterone levels to a point where you may potentially fail a blood test if you are a professional athlete, if you listen to all of their current records back to back. But yeah, there you go. The Depussification of the Nation tour. Maybe King Ov Wyrms would be a good addition to that as well. So let's get back to it. This is dark, dank, dissonant, and it is absolutely getting a top notch this week. Okay, over on Metal Storm, we've got a couple of familiar names. We already spoke about them because they were on No Clean Singing. But then we also have news that Woe are going to be releasing a new album. It says here September the 29th sees the release of Woe's fifth full-length installment entitled Legacies of Frailty, the successor to 2017's Hope Attrition, which I absolutely loved. Was mixed by Chris Grigg in Queens, New York, and mastered by V. Santura at Woodshed Studio in Germany. It says here the black metalers from New York also premiered 2 tracks in preview via their Bandcamp player. I am not going to risk blowing out anybody's windshield because of Bandcamp's bizarre approach to volume management. But let's see if we can find those tracks on YouTube and give them a quick listen. Success, friends. I have found Legacies of Frailty by Woe. Is this the song Legacies of Frailty, or is this the song Scavenger Prophets? Who knows? It's 6 minutes 42 seconds. We're going to give it about two minutes or so. Like I said, really, really liked their previous Woe record, so I have higher expectations of this one. Let's give it a whirl. Frostbitten, unique, lots of atmosphere. I love it. I think it sounds absolutely fucking awesome. Is it what I was expecting after the last album? I'm not really sure. I'll need to actually go back and revisit the last album to to kind of properly get my head around it again before this new one is released. I'm certainly glad they're putting out something new, that's for sure. And I'm going to see if before the end of the year I can get somebody from Woe on the podcast as well. But yeah, like it very, very much. I'm going to jump, because this is fairly lengthy, I'm going to jump to the 4-minute mark, and let's hear where the song has gotten up to by this point. I can hear loads of different influences here. There's like a faint Akrakoka influence here. I can hear some Ultha. There is second wave Norwegian black metal here. Yeah, I think it's great. Very, very. I mean, this is suddenly rocketed up pretty high on my list of anticipated records for between now and the end of the year. Anyway, okay, we spoke about Wolfheart earlier, not a band I give a fuck about. Madball confirm UK shows. That'll be pretty cool. They're doing a 7-date run at the London Underworld. For those of you not in the UK, the Underworld is probably about a 500 capacity venue. I've actually seen Madball there before. It's a great venue for them. I may need to make my way over there when the time comes. Although I say that, and then there's always something that comes up. So I will, however, be at Fortress Fest next year. I know a couple of you guys have already mentioned you've got tickets, so expect to see me there. Imperialist are releasing a new EP later this year. It says here US sci-fi themed black metal band Imperialist have extended their cooperation with Transcending Obscurity Records and concurrently announced the release of their new EP dubbed Quantum. The short but highly potent release will be out by the end of this year as a precursor to their next full-length, which is presently in the works and should see the light of day sometime in 2024. I really like that debut record. Kelly T of Slave to the Underground was on the podcast, and I remember her talking about the record, which thus prompted me to go and check it out. Really liked it. So let's hear what this sounds like. This song is called Call of Vulcane. On their previous record, there was definitely a bit of an Emperor vibe to some of the music, and I kind of feel like that it's still there to a degree, but it's taken a bit of a back step, and the music itself has gotten a little darker as well, which I applaud them for doing, because I think that direction suits them really, really well. So, yeah, so far, very impressed. There's also a bit of an old school vibe in that break that we just heard now. Not the faster bit, but the slower part. It kind of reminds me of, some early kind of Florida death metal, which again, I think suits them very, very well. And if I were their producer, I would say more of that. Good job by the gentleman from Imperialist. Okay, let's check out one more and then we will wrap it up. What have we got? We got High on Fire confirming their West Coast shows. It looks to me like they're definitely going to wait until next year now to put out their record. I am very, very excited about that. Let's check out the new Sledier. So I went on a bit of a rant about Sledier's comment about how the black metal scene is devoid of any inspiration when this record was first announced. The song wasn't bad. Let's hear what the new song sounds like. I've got a Bandcamp player here, but I'm pretty confident we can find it on YouTube. I still don't understand why they have to use an exclamation in the in the title to the record, White Heart. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I think last time we listened to The Futile Fires of Man, which was a pretty decent song. So let's hear what White Heart sounds like, with the caveat that if you're going to besmirch the state of the black metal scene, you need to deliver the goods. So let's hear whether or not they do on this particular occasion. Gotta say, he might be a cranky old bastard when it comes to new black metal, but that is pretty goddamn good. I'd say it's better than the first track that I heard off this record. It's aggressive, it's nasty, it's got just enough melody, it's dark. It looks to me like Deborah Morty are coming out swinging at the end of this year. And what has just caught my eye line as I was listening to this, in the right-hand bucket of the screen, Inferno, Stars Within and Stars Without, projected into the Matrix of Time. Oh my god. Okay, I take that back. I got really excited, and then it says taken from the album Paradigma, which I know really well. I know the album. But I mean, come on, how am I supposed to remember at my age this song like Stars Within and Stars Without projected into the Matrix of Time? You guys teased me there because they put this video out 3 hours ago, which is why I thought, oh my god, a new Inferno song. Apparently not. So Deborah Morty, you're on my shit list for that. Anyway, let's get back to Slideer. Actually, we go to the very beginning of the song again, so we'll skip on to, let's actually skip to minute 2. I almost dread to say it, especially because of how strongly I felt about the comments that they made about the scene when this record was announced. But that really is top notch. That is fucking excellent. Also, as a side note, my heart hurts at that unnecessary tease by Deborah Morty about a new Inferno album. On that note, my friends, I'm going to wrap up for this week. Of course, I still have one treat left for all of you. A track off the last Dread Sovereign record, Alchemical Warfare. The song is called Ruin Upon the Temple Mount. It is one of my favorite songs that Alan Averill has ever recorded. And as he kind of hinted over the course of our conversation, this album was a little bit overlooked, criminally so as far as I'm concerned, because I think it is absolutely fantastic. I think number 3 in my list of favorite albums the year that it came out. It was certainly in the top 10. It's magnificent. And upon this, there can be no debate. My friends, I will be back next week. My guest is going to be Evan Hopper of Quell. I am going to leave you all now, but as always, I urge you to stay safe, stay healthy, and I will see you bad motherfuckers again next week.